you're watching this video, chances are you're in a hospital bed or sitting in a waiting room, or maybe you've been bouncing between doctors for months, and you're wondering where God went. You've been praying. People keep telling you got this, or God's got this, and everything happens for a reason. But honestly, it doesn't feel God's got anything right now. In fact, it feels like God packed up and left town just when you needed God the most. My name's Paul. I'm a pastor, but I've also spent 15 years working in nuclear medicine. And I want to tell you today, and today I want to take a time to tell you when God felt completely silent during my own medical crisis, and what I learned about where God actually is during the whole time. Now, this story takes place right after I transitioned from working in the medical field to working as a pastor. And it was a Sunday morning, and I was just feeling awful. So awful, in fact, that I called the president of the congregation, was like, "Can you take me to the hospital?" So he came over, picked me up, and we head out to the hospital. And I was just in horrible pain. So terrible that I've never experienced this type of pain before. It was just awful. And so we went there, and we spent hours there. And test after test, they were like, "We can't find anything wrong with you." This sounds familiar, right? "We can't find anything wrong with you. But here's some medication to manage your symptoms." And that's the phrase I learned to hate. You're managing your symptoms well. So let me tell you something. I wasn't managing my symptoms well. I was falling apart, and I was praying constantly for God to say, "God, can you tell the doctors what's wrong with me? Can we just fix me? Can I just be healed?" Now months went by. More doctors, more tests, more of the same phrase, "You're managing your symptoms well." Now, having worked in the medical field for a long time, I was convinced that was my gallbladder, but my GI doctor was absolutely sure that it wasn't. And finally, I convinced a friend of mine who was a family medical doc to say, "Hey, can you order me a HIDA scan?" He said, "Yeah, because you've done this test for a long time. I know you know what the symptoms are, and I trust your expertise." So the HIDA scan basically is a test that checks to see how well your gallbladder is squeezing. And guess what? I was right. My gallbladder was not functioning at all. In fact, it was working less than 3%, when it's supposed to be working 30% or better. But here's the kicker. Instead of agreeing, the GI doc was like, "No, that's a false positive. I refuse to let you get the surgery." No amount of cajoling, no much of me threatening or anything like that. He was convinced it wasn't my gallbladder. So I suffered. I suffered some more. One or two more years went by, and I'm still in pain. It got so bad that I didn't want to eat anymore, because every time I ate, the pain came. So I didn't want to eat. And through all this, and I mean all of this, I was praying. I was begging God, help the doctors see what's wrong. Convince them that I know what I'm talking about. Give me some relief. Just show me what to do. Just show up. And you know what it felt like? Silence. Complete, deafening silence from God. But here's what I discovered later. After I finally got the surgery and started feeling human again, God wasn't silent. God wasn't absent. What I realized is during this whole period of time, God was teaching me something I desperately needed to learn, which is how to be an advocate. Not just for myself, but for others. God was showing me what it was like to be a patient who had to fight to be heard, who had to push back when doctors dismissed my concerns. I think about it this way. Imagine you're in the palm of God's hand, but when you look around trying to see God, all you can see around is space around you. You can't see God because God is literally the foundation that you're standing on, the support that's holding you up. When God feels silent, sometimes God is so close, supporting us so completely that we can't stand back far enough to see it. In my 15 years of working in nuclear medicine, I learned something very interesting. When I was doing procedures, especially stressful ones in the middle of the night, patients didn't want to talk about their medical condition. They would rather talk about their faith. I remember one instance at 3:30 in the morning, because that's when it seems that this always happens. I'm starting to hide a scan on a woman who was having gallbladder issues, just like me. So one of the things I always did was, the rooms are always cold, right? Those radiology rooms are always cold. So I asked her, do you want a blanket? And she looked at me and said, are you saved? The cool thing is we talked through the hour-long scan, and I realized God was showing up. Not in the dramatic healing that she was hoping for, but in that conversation, in that connection, in the care she was receiving, even at 3:30 in the morning. So if you're in a hospital bed right now, if you're waiting for test results, if you've been fighting doctors to get to listen to you and God seems to be completely absent, I want you to know something. Your struggle is real, your fear is valid, and God's feeling silent doesn't mean God isn't there. Sometimes God's presence feels like the strength to ask one more question. Sometimes it's the nurse who takes the extra moment to explain something or just give you that personal human touch that you so desperately need. Sometimes it's a friend who drives you to the ER on a Sunday morning. Sometimes God's presence is the voice inside you that says, keep advocating for yourself when everyone else is telling you you're just fine. God may not show up in the way you expect, but God is closer than you think, supporting you in ways you might not recognize until you look back. You're not alone in this, even when it feels like you are.